still pretty lax in their attitudes when it comes to home security.
It is the new world that we live in.
It's a horrible feeling, a total violation.
But there are ways to safeguard
a new
your
personal
home and make
surveillance product is hitting the market, and it's designed to protect you.
Private
using
sector
the
are being
latest
targeted in a sophisticated state-based cyber attack. Here to break it down for us is Calamity Security expert
Daniel Lukovitz, the CEO of Calamity Monitoring.
Thanks for having me and such a wonderful intro.
Standard home alarm. Daniel Lukovitz is the CEO.
Our security expert uses a wire coat hanger to break into this house.
I've asked him to come on the program tonight because his observations are instructive to all of us across Australia. Daniel Lukovitz wrote, much contemporary security and law enforcement focuses on terrorism.
The issues that were raised involve crowd safety. And crowd safety now has got a tremendous amount of science behind it.
As well as looking at high-tech crime and high-tech crime prevention, it's also important to remember low-tech skills, good security, effective risk management, police knowing how to shoot straight, the basics, as well as looking at all the sexy new toys.
He's fighting back against these online slacktivists. A lot of other companies are going to have to learn how to do the same.
But what criminals are looking for is the best ability to have a robbery and leave without getting caught. So if your property looks like there's a good chance that they're going to get detected or they're going to have a hard time getting in and there's a chance they're going to jail, they're going to go next door instead.
Whoa, someone's watching us.
My staff are watching us 24 hours a day.
This is Calamity Monitoring's headquarters. First, we need to get into the building. And it's easier said than done.
These doors weigh about 200 kilos each, and no one gets in here unless we know who they are and we want them here.
One of the things that always upsets me is when we get a call at Calamity from someone who just got robbed saying, I need help.
From here, the security of thousands of homes and businesses across the country is monitored 24 hours a day.
It's technology that saves lives. I call the people at my office heroes in a headset because they literally save people's lives. It's a fantastic company, it's a fantastic service. And
everyone at home is watching and listening to you and thinking, why on earth were you contracted in to clean up the mess? You've explained better than anyone I've heard in the last few weeks where the systemic failures are. Thank you very much for your time, Daniel, and I can tell you what, you'll be back on the show in a not too distant future.
I suppose, look, privacy is a bit like virginity. There's a lot of temptations to give it away, but once it's gone, you never get it back. So if people...
Wow. Good morning, everybody.
Generally speaking, statistics are flat all year round, so I would be telling people their New Year's resolution should probably be look at your home security, and it's probably easier to do that than to quit smoking or hit the gym, which is the usual resolution people have.
And an easier one to achieve.
Hopefully, yes.
Absolutely. Daniel Lukovitz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, LinkedIn Live, and welcome at lunchtime when, if you're sitting in Sydney, you should be in lockdown eating your lunch. And if you're sitting in Melbourne, you're probably wondering what the hell is going on, because not only are you in lockdown, today there was an earthquake. It's not a good time to be in Melbourne. I'm really sorry for you guys. You've got riots, you've got violence, you've got people being angry. So what we're going to do is we're just going to calm down. We're going to shift down a gear and we're going to talk about something that matters to everyone, and it's possibly something that people aren't thinking about, and we're going to be talking about food. Now, before we introduce my guest, I want to tell you a little bit about the journey that we've been on. Dean and I did a podcast a few months ago called Food for First Responders, and I'll introduce Dean properly in a moment, but what we were looking at was how food can affect your performance, it can affect your mood. And this is obviously of particular importance to the people who move in my professional networks, so security, law enforcement, fireys, AMBOs, people, you know, the sheepdogs of society, the people who are keeping us safe, the people who protect us day and night, and often as a result of that just eat really crappy food. And besides the obvious thing, which is that you get what some cops refer to as a stable shooting platform or a big gut, it can also have an impact on your mood, which can affect how you relate to each other. And so at this time, when the way we relate to each other and the way we behave toward each other is so important, the whole we're all in this together, and also at a time when we're sitting at home in a sedentary lifestyle, many times sitting on the couch, eating junk food, getting snacks delivered, it's really important that we actually look at this. And so this is why I thought it was actually good to sort of reprise the Food for First Responders podcast. But because this is actually live and interactive, you'll be able to actually throw your comments up on screen. You know, we see those. Hi to everybody who's already added a comment, waved and said hello. Keep them coming. It's great to see you here. But let me first introduce Dean. So Dean I've known for a number of years, and Dean is the director of Simpler Health, and I'll put links to all of this in the comments below. And he's got a clinical experience and has probably forgotten more about food than most people will ever remember. And Dean's experience spans the pharmaceutical industry, medical communication, and the scientific consulting field. So he takes a very scientific approach to metabolism, the way our bodies the way our bodies deal with food. Now, tremendously qualified gentleman. He's educated in biochemistry. He's educated in microbiology. He graduated with first-class honours in biotechnology. So, whereas a lot of the advice people get on food is from people whose only qualification is they're skinny and they look on Instagram, this is a guy who really knows what he's talking about. So I want you to take the advantage, if you can, pop your questions in the comment box below, and Dean will hopefully get around to talking to them. But first, join me in welcoming Dean Kilby. Hey, Dean, thanks a lot for coming today. I see you're on the couch as well, and you're rocking a fantastic lockdown hairdo, which is certainly better than what I can say for myself. I think this will probably become an audio podcast, so we can do away with the bad haircuts. But how's everything going at your end, and how have you been entertaining yourself through lockdown?
Oh my goodness, it is entertaining. I got to say that, but it's been fine for me. I mean, I think during the entire pandemic, my knowledge base became, at least for the people that I've been able to interact with and help, pretty relevant to the dealings of their day-to-day. It's been pretty good in that sense, and an opportunity for me to make a difference to some people. But I appreciate the intro.
Well, look, Dean, it's a pleasure. I mean, what have you noticed in terms of as people are going through lockdown, and you've been seeing clients through that, helping them with their weight loss goals, helping them with their with their food management goals. How have you seen people's approaches to food has actually changed within lockdown?
Well, all structure tends to go out the window, so routine, etc., and you can see the changes in eating habits depending on people's stress levels. And those stress levels combined with the uncertainty of life, when all of a sudden the future that you're living into just kind of falls apart and everything becomes very uncertain. It's difficult for people to manage themselves. And the ones that approach me tend to want to reestablish that structure, that rigor, and at least bring some certainty to the basic foundation of their nutrition. I think for many people, it makes an enormous difference in their ability to not only regulate themselves in their day-to-day activities, but also calm themselves down and be able to look out into the future. And if there is something that they can have a certain degree of control over, it is their current health and well-being right now and what they can do about it moving into whatever the future might look like. So I think for those that do create that commitment, it can be extraordinarily empowering during very uncertain times.
Now, traditionally, it was often felt that things like depression or general angst or ennui contributors to weight gain. And we're not just talking about people who might be taking antidepressant medication or thing where weight gain is a known side effect, but just people who would prefer to sit on the couch with a little black dog sitting next to them rather than go out and exercise. People who would turn to sugars and fats, ice cream, chocolate, to cheer them up. I mean, what at a biological level, what is happening when we eat things that are known as comfort food? Why do those things bring us comfort?
Yeah, well, if you look at the foods and you examine the kinds of foods that you eat when you're stressed and overwhelmed and everything's occurring to you as a threat, life is occurring as a threat, and there's a lot of uncertainty, the kinds of foods that we tend to turn to are the combination of sugar and fat. And that nutrient combination doesn't tend to happen or come together in nature. We put them together ourselves when we bake, for example, in the form of cake, etc., but especially in the form of highly processed foods. So these types of processed foods are readily available and accessible, and they're just easy to consume large quantities of. That nutrient combination, it's reminiscent of the nutrient combination when we're infants. Breastfeeding, for example, on milk has that sugar-fat combination, and that's a time when it's appropriate. It's the most rapid growth period of our life. But if you look at what happens when a baby feeds and then immediately after, it's in a very restful state. It just wants to sleep. We tend to do that to ourselves. I think it's a survival strategy. You know, when everything's overwhelming and coming at us, it's a good mechanism and a way to kind of opt out and numb ourselves from the stress and hardship that we might be dealing with or how life might be occurring to us. That nutrient combination, as I said, doesn't tend to happen in nature. You see protein and carbohydrates together. You see protein and fat together, but rarely do you see sugar and fat together. And these are the foods that not only alter our mood and our mental state, but cause us to gain a lot of weight as well.
So, I mean, anybody who's ever made ice cream at home will know that the ingredients of ice cream are literally fat, that's the milk that goes into it, and sugar. So of those two chemicals, because, I mean, food is a chemical that you just described, fat and sugar, ice cream is literally a 1 litre tub of it. So it's not an accident then that there is this sort of stereotype of for example, women crying through a romantic comedy with a tub of ice cream just after they've gone through a breakup. I mean, that's actually happening at a chemical level, and our bodies are not evolved to be able to deal with that, are they?
No, not at all. Certainly not in the quantities that we tend to consume. The average Australian adult consumes about 42 kilograms of sugar every year, which is an enormous amount. And we've all been...
Wait, hang on. You've told me this before, and I couldn't believe it then, and I thought maybe I'd be able to handle it now, but I can't. Let's just go over that again. 42 kilograms of sugar a year. And that's the average adult. That's not a fatty. That's just your average, person in reasonable shape is consuming that much. And I mean, obviously, they're not sitting there eating it by the teaspoon. This is coming from natural as well as additive sources, isn't it?
Exactly. The total amount, and there's sugars in everything. And the number of people that say to me, Dean, I don't eat sugar, I don't add sugar to anything, but upon examination, when you look at the daily intake, it's quite substantial. And there's sugar can be labeled in many different ways. There's a number of different names for it, but everything from the honey, the fruit juice, the excessive amount of fruit juice that people consume is quite extraordinary. Liquid calories tend to add up very easily. And then there's all the condiments. And even if you just take a sandwich, each slice of bread is the equivalent of 4 to 5 teaspoons of sugar. These refined carbohydrates can have an enormous effect on our hormonal levels and throw us into hormonal imbalance that is conducive to weight gain.
Now, can you explain the difference for viewers between a simple carbohydrate and a complex or refined carbohydrate?
Yeah, so carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates are the sugar, for example. So this is a combination or you have two molecules, fructose and glucose and fructose come together to form sucrose. That's what you would call a simple sugar. Complex carbohydrates are where you have a large number of glucose molecules stuck together. And then you can have carbohydrates that elicit a high degree of insulin upon consumption, and other carbohydrates, the insulin release is a little bit slower or not as great. So that's called glycemic index, or GI, and you may have heard that before. What's the GI of particular foods? Ideally, you want to decrease your glycemic load. So that's the total amount of, so the glycemic index, so the way in which the carbohydrates stimulate insulin, multiplied by the total volume or grams of carbohydrates. So essentially, stop eating so much sugar and lower the total amount of carbohydrates that you're consuming.
So when you see low GI appearing on something, that's a good thing. Low GI is what we want, yeah?
Ideally, yeah. The problem with sugar is this, as I said, it's a combination of fructose and glucose. Your body is designed to be able to handle the glucose. You can store the glucose. That gets stored in your muscle in the form of glycogen. That's an immediate energy supply. When your muscle glycogen stores are full, you've got to store that excess glucose somewhere. So if you keep eating carbohydrates, which gets broken down to glucose, where are you going to store it? And some of my clients, I explain it to them like that room that you have in your home, where if you've got excess furniture or just stuff you don't want around, you just kind of like hide it away in that room. That's what your fat tissue is like. And that's where you store not only glucose, but other toxins, etc. And in excess, you may as well consider glucose as toxic. And I use the term glucose toxicity, which can have some profound health effects. So fructose, on the other hand, doesn't get stored like glucose or processed by other tissues in the body. It accumulates in the liver, and people end up with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now the #1 cause for liver transplants in the world. So it's a big issue.
And it's interesting because, I mean, if anyone had been paying attention for the last 2 years, you'd think that COVID was the only health problem that people in the world actually face. And yet this is the stuff that's actually killing people, and nobody seems to be paying attention, are they?
No. I mean, last year, there was 900 or so deaths from COVID in Australia. There was about 15,000 deaths from type 2 diabetes. That doesn't really get spoken about.
Right. I mean, I can just imagine what would happen if Premier stood up at a press conference every day and said, today 16 people died of fatty liver disease and 23 people died of preventable heart disease. It's just remarkable how a panic has popped up over one significant health problem, and yet these other things have just been popped in the too hard basket. Dean, one of the challenges during lockdown has been dealing with food. I mean, look, we're very fortunate that, with the exception of some, herd mentality, panic buying, and suddenly, the shelves being stripped bare, basically, by stupid people. Generally, food has been available to us, but one of the things that I found particularly cringy throughout the pandemic, certainly, last year when all of this was, very new to the whole world, were people who were, and I'm saying this to Jason Semple when I interviewed him a while back, people were saying sort of stay safe to each other, and staying safe essentially meant sitting on the couch, watching Netflix, ordering delivery food. And this is what people were doing. And, it was cringy as hell watching celebrities all getting together and singing, John Lennon's Imagine, and, while sitting in sort of 16 bedroom mansions, eating delivery food, and genuinely convinced that they were doing it as tough as Anne Frank did during the Holocaust. And it was quite ridiculous. But the delivery food has been an interesting phenomena, because I got given a voucher the other day to use for one of the delivery platforms. I mean, look, I cook my own food. I don't really need to get other people's takeaway delivered. If I want takeaway, I'll go and take it away myself. But I jumped on one of these apps, and something that just astonished me was not that the local pizza place delivers and the local chicken shop delivers and the local sandwich shop delivers, but it's that service stations now deliver. And needless to say, there's not one healthy thing you can get at your typical servo. It's where you go for the late night munchies, your ice creams, your chips, your sugary things, your salty things like this. And these people now deliver, which means you can be sitting on your couch at home and you can suddenly decide, you know what, I could really smash a Violet Crumble now, or a Snickers, or a tub of ice cream. And 20 minutes later, you can have a migrant worker on a bicycle dropping that off at your house. This is weaponizing the ability to eat junk food, isn't it?
Yeah. The accessibility and availability of these types of food products is just extraordinary. And, in my place, I don't have those types of junk foods, not because I'm that so disciplined or I don't like them. I love them. I mean, my brain can be as addicted to those types of foods as the next person. I don't have them here because I don't trust myself. If they were here in my vicinity, I would eat them. When I returned from the United States last year in March, and I was quarantining, and some people dropped some food off for me, and in one of the boxes, there was all these great produce, but there was the inclusion of a bag of potato crisps, and it was quite a large bag, and I don't ordinarily eat those foods, and for good reason, but it was there, and I put a movie on, and I ate the whole bag of chips, because why not? It was there. And so in the space of whatever, an hour and a half, however long a movie is, I just, rammed 900 calories into my face. And here's the thing with those types of foods where it's just carbohydrate and fat, particularly if they're savory flavored, your whole sensory perception is tricked into thinking that you're consuming protein, but your brain's like, where's the protein? So it's going to instruct you to keep eating until you get a sufficient amount of protein. So you get to the bottom of the bag of chips, and lo and behold, where was I? In front of the refrigerator, looking for what else I can stick in my face.
So people aren't imagining that when you have that sort of, you can't just stop at one. I mean, that's not just because things happen to be particularly tasty. There's some sort of magic in, your Doritos or your Pringles or something that makes, I think the term people use is moreish, that you just want to have more and more. That's not an accident, is it?
Oh, no, the food industry absolutely have mastered designing products that stimulate, they don't satiate. So they'll stimulate you to want more. There was some great research. One of the biggest cardiometabolic research institutions in Australia is called the Charles Perkins Centre, and the director of that, he originally was an entomologist, an Australian scientist. He developed his career at Oxford, but he studied locusts and the migratory patterns of these insects. And what he started to then discover is that what influenced their brain development was the protein to carbohydrate ratio in their diets. And as legend has it, I don't think it's too much of a legend because I heard it from him himself. When he came back to Australia in 1999, he got drunk with a neighbor who happened to be a nutrition scientist who, in a drunken state, invited him to present at an upcoming conference. So Stephen goes and presents at this conference thinking he'll never see these nutrition scientists again because he's an entomologist, an insect scientist. Anyway, he presents the data, and what came of that was a number of key collaborations that has really contributed enormously to our understanding of nutrition science. So if you have a lower protein to carbohydrate ratio, you tend to overconsume these carbohydrate-laden foods, put on more weight, are less fertile, but in that state, in the organism studied, live a bit longer. If there's a higher protein to lower carbohydrate ratio, those organisms were leaner, more fertile, but didn't live as long. So this kind of points to that there's not one single dietary approach that a person ought to follow for the entirety or duration of their whole lifespan. It's dependent on what you're committed to at that period of your life. And if you're wanting to attract a mate and look leaner and start a family, then you would eat a certain way, and that would adjust as you move into your elderly years.
So is that why, the Dad Bod is a thing?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, you've got to adjust your dietary approach, but also there's different stresses as people move into different periods of their life, different financial constraints, and you don't have as much time available to, just be as active as you once were. So you need to be a little bit more conscious of your dietary intake. Also, your hormonal, your hormones change, especially so for women. And, it's estimated every 18 months or so, adult women are on some kind of dietary program to handle their weight and body shape for the majority of their adult life. And if you go through enough of these losing weight and then regaining the weight, if you go through that cycle enough times, you know, whether you're a man or a woman, you're in your 40s, it gets to the point where you throw your hands up in the air and think, you know what, screw it. People need to love me the way that I am. This is too difficult, because it does get harder and harder each time. The problem is, you know, you don't love yourself, so it makes it really difficult to reconcile that kind of a challenge.
Let's so we've spoken about the impact on adults, and you know how people potentially can diet for life, or they can yo-yo, or they can change various things. Let's look at children now, because children today face a challenge that without question, you and I didn't have as kids. So when we were kids, the only food you had access to was the food that your parents kept in the house. So if your house had chocolate in it, you had access to chocolate. If your house didn't have access to chocolate, unless you had money, you didn't get any. So, okay, yes, you could stop at the lolly shop on the way back from school when, you know, we were all walking 25 miles to school in the snow barefoot uphill, or at least everyone I know seemed to. And that was generally it. Whereas now, I think there's a couple of things that have changed. So the first one is the availability of junk food. I mean, if you look at, say, the classic fast food venues, okay, sure, you know, McDonald's always had, you know, apple pie or cookies or sundaes, things like that. But I mean, Pizza Hut now has diversified into other oven-baked desserts. So you can get a chocolate lava cake from Pizza Hut. KFC now have their I forget what they call it, their crushies, which are essentially, thick shakes and milkshakes with, lots of add-ins, M&M and stuff like that. Just because, KFC, in case you wanted something healthy to go with your fried chicken, you could get one of those. And of course, now this stuff delivers, but it's more than that, because the advertising has changed over the years. Now, those who follow me on LinkedIn or who know me personally know that, I'm a libertarian. I'm a real free market sort of guy. I don't like red tape. I don't like the government telling people, what they can and can't do. And I don't like the government, meddling in people's lives. So maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when McDonald's were moving into delivery, and there was outrage, and people were saying, "Oh my God, there's an obesity epidemic, and this is going to make people fat, and this is going to harm people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds." And the usual sort of nanny staters were up in arms about that. My attitude was that, hang on, you have no right to be telling people how to spend their hard-earned. And look, I'm not a particular consumer of McDonald's, but if people want to buy it, they should. I don't have a problem with that. But, my attitude has changed somewhat, for the simple reason that the advertising now is so in your face. Now, it must be 30 years ago or 20 years ago, Australia got rid of cigarette advertising. And I'm sure that probably had an impact on, people just casually picking up a desire for advertising. But I was talking to a young teenager a while ago, and he's working really hard on addressing a weight problem, because he knows he's living in a world where you find your match via social media, and all your friends are going on Instagram, and basically, it was never easy being a little fat kid. I can tell you that, but it's it's more challenging now. And the thing is that when this child, and he's a child, is going through his social media feed, Instagram, Facebook, the internet has learned what he likes, and the internet learns what you like. So it puts ads in front of you that it thinks are going to be of interest to you. So if you go to Pizza Hut's website one night just because you feel like a pizza, there's nothing wrong with that. Who doesn't like a pizza every now and then? The internet algorithm goes, okay, we know you like pizza. And so the advertisers want you to see their ads. And of course, the platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Google, they get more money when you see those ads and you click on it. So now you're looking at Instagram and you're looking at your friends and you're looking at funny memes and you might be looking at, cat photos or everything is. And suddenly up pops a video, not just of a pizza, but now of a slow motion, gooey, chocolatey, melty lava cake with a big banner saying, 1 day only, 40% off. This is irresistible. And the analogy I suppose I drew when I was talking to this young man, I said, okay, so would you say you've got an addiction to food? And I mean, you'll tell me in a minute whether or not that's actually a thing or it's just a mindset. But the kid said, yes, absolutely. I've got a sugar addiction. I'm addicted to food. I said, okay, if you were a heroin addict, everybody would understand that you have a physically debilitating condition and it affects your ability, and so you must take heroin or you're just gonna feel terrible. So that's easily understood. And people who take heroin, they know it's bad for them. There's no one who ever says, heroin's fine. They know it's a bad thing. Just like people who are overweight, they know food is bad for them. They get it, but it doesn't mean they can control it. But I said the difference is this: imagine you were a heroin addict, except now when you walk along the street, a bus drives past, and on the side of that bus is a billboard saying, "Hey, you, take heroin." And you know that's a bad idea, so you look away and you turn your face, and now you look at a building, and on the side of the building there's a billboard that says, "Take heroin." You can't handle it, so you look down at the ground, and on the ground there's a stencil saying, "Take heroin." And then you look up, and the people walking past you are all wearing T-shirts saying, "Wouldn't you like some heroin today?" I mean, it's everywhere. But this is exactly the same with the food advertising. So it's really causing me to sort of have a conflict with my own politics, because I think people should be allowed to buy whatever they want, and I don't think government should be getting involved in advertisements or telling businesses how they should spend their hard earned, as long as it's honest. But I now see that this stuff is like laser focused, almost brainwashing, that's so much more powerful than our ability to manage desire. So if you've got someone who's struggling with a food problem, and they're seeing ads every day of these like gooey, delicious, chocolatey, sugary thing, what's that doing to a person's brain?
Yeah, it's shrinking their brain to start with. It really is. I mean, it's having an enormous impact on the development of the younger generation, our kids, teenagers especially. Teenagers consume the most amount of sugar of all the demographics. And there's a phenomenon called inconsequential kids. I think it was in Ireland or Northern Ireland. So there was a disproportionately high number of these young kids, and we're talking sort of 12 to 15 years of age, I think it was, that was showing up in accident and emergency in the hospitals. Silly things like chasing a ball out onto the road and getting hit by a car, etc. The stuff that you learn at a much younger age not to do. But these kids were kind of, having accidents and so forth, and you wouldn't expect it at that age. So they started examining these kids, and they called them inconsequential kids. They lacked the ability to sequence the consequence of certain actions and then hold themselves back and inhibit those responses so that can stay safe. And what they found was common amongst these kids was a gross undernourishment in terms of low protein intake and very high sugar intake. So they weren't getting sufficient protein, which is needed to lay down those neuronal brain patterns, especially in those parts of the brain that regulate responsibility. And they were overstimulated with sugar. So, this is incredible. I was driving the car one day and I turned right at an intersection about 50 meters down the road. There was no crossing. This young man is just walking across the road on his mobile phone. So we've got inconsequential brain development, and excess screen technology is a big part of that as well. So he's walking across the road, looking at his mobile phone. I slammed the brakes on and beeped the horn. And if that was you and I, or I, Daniel, that would have frightened us. We would have jumped. It would have shocked us, woken us up somewhat, and we probably would have ran across to the side of the road. He stopped, looked up at me calmly, and then looked back at his phone and just kept walking at the same pace, like didn't care. This is the kind of generation that we're raising. given the diet that they're consuming. So excess sugar consumption, excess screen time, this is what we're doing in terms of the next generation. I mean, what you've said contributed. I mean, there's so much in what you said. The advertising, for example, yes, consumption of cigarettes has dropped dramatically, but there's a lot of aspects to the industry that has to pivot. If you kind of look back, and all of a sudden avocados became popular. How come everyone's eating avocados? Is it now that we've just woken up to the fact that they're so great?
And of course, isn't smashed avocado the reason young people will never own their own home, we're told,
Right. Right. And people are saying, oh, Dean, I just eat salad all the time. Why can't I lose weight? And I look at the total calorie intake of their salad, and it's got salmon and avocados and nuts and all this sort of stuff, high calorie foods, which are great and healthful, but not for them at that time if they're trying to lose weight. But you kind of wonder, how come we're all eating so many avocados? And well, the tobacco farmers had to pivot somehow. What did they start growing? Avocados. I mean, it's quite a powerful group. And, I think more recently, orange juice received a lower health star rating, if you can, believe health star ratings, but it received a lower health star rating that's like, I think 2 out of 5 or something like that, consistent with soft drinks, which is appropriate. The orange farmers will figure it out as well. They'll have to pivot and work out how to deal with the downturn in that industry if people really are that committed to managing their health. But, I think the younger generation, if adults looking down a pretty grim future, 2/3 of the adult population are at least overweight. A third is, so half of that cohort is obese. So that's a BMI, body mass index, above 30. Where a lot of people, that's just normal for them. Oh, it's not too bad. I just need to lose 5 to 10 kilos, Dean. I look at them, I see the fat around their neck. I know that they're dealing with sleep apnea. They're not waking up refreshed in the morning. That's impacting their brain health. They're at greater risk of degenerative neurological disorders, such as dementia. It's not just about heart health. Their joints are achy because their tissue is degenerating faster from the excess insulin that their pancreas is secreting. But when you look at children, at least a quarter, it's probably closer to 1/3 of children are now overweight. And when I was growing up in country Victoria, we had I remember them vividly, a couple of fat kids, which I was friends with, and I loved them dearly. I thought they were great, but they didn't make it to 40. And I look back at my school photos and, compared to the size of some kids today, they weren't so bad. So I really worry about what life is going to look like in terms of their cognitive development, in terms of their ability to regulate their mood and emotions as they grow up and be productive, and their social skills, their ability to relate to people, but also manage their just basic health and hygiene as they get older, given how addicted they are to certain substances, whether it be glucose or screen time. It's not healthy.
But it's even happening at the other end of the spectrum as well, because you've got young people who are extremely image conscious because, they live in a cult of selfies and social media and dating online. And, this term shredding, which didn't exist 10 years ago, where you've now got, 14, 15-year-old school kids who have personal trainers and, they're going to the gym and they're taking, supplements which, once upon a time, the kids on the high school athletics team were told to drink a lot of water and eat a banana before training. Whereas, now they're going into, jars of all sorts of interesting things. And for the most part, these supplements are, little more than, amino acids that your body already produces, plus sugar, plus caffeine. So they're really just the sort of modern take on the energy drinks, which once upon a time were just sort of caffeine and sugar that was well marketed. The food industry is probably more cunning than the tobacco industry, because I guess the thing about the tobacco industry is, look, at least we're not talking sort of Mad Men era in the 50s. At least for the last 20 or 30 years, right? Unless you came down from another planet, there's no way you didn't know the cigarettes were bad for you. Now, I don't take away, people's ability to assess risk and people to make choices about their life. I mean, I think everybody who knows riding a motorbike is inherently dangerous, but some people are, they're comfortable with that. And so fine, if you want to smoke, okay, fine, you're doing dangerously. I don't think there are many people who realize the sort of immediate danger of food. And yes, we all get it in the sense that, all right, if we're overweight or, we're feeling fat or we're feeling unattractive, but people don't realize the more subtle impacts that it has on your mood, on your anger, on your relationship with other people, on your ability to perform in a professional context. Look, we all know if you're an Olympic level athlete, then obviously the food that goes in, is extremely important. But if you're just someone who works in an office, there really is a big deal between what you have for your afternoon snack and how that's going to affect you. Could you tell us a bit more about, what helps you perform and what stops you performing?
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to understand is a lot of the originating nutrition science was focused very much on athletes. And there's a phenomenon called the athlete's paradox. So, some of these elite athletes can consume 6, 7, 8, up to 10,000 kilocalories a day. But they don't gain weight, obviously. But why? Because they're swimming so much or they're running so much and they're performing nonstop. That's their life. So it's not appropriate for the average person to eat like these elite athletes. So that's the first thing. And a lot of the foods and the supplements and these kind of training and nutritional programs are designed for people who are at that upper end of energy exertion. That's not the average person, especially our younger generation who are looking up to those athletes. They idolize them. They don't listen to their parents. I'm talking about the kids. They don't listen to their teachers. But, if some of these athletes speak up, they'll listen to them and they follow them. And, it's the physiological nature of some of these foods is so addictive. To think that people have a choice is stupid. Is just outright stupid to think human beings have a say in the matter. No, you're a stimulus response machine. And your brain is highly vulnerable to the addictive nature of some of these foods. And that sugar-fat combo is so damn addictive. It's just try it out. Just stop eating those foods. See how long you last. Unless you're doing it in a structured way with support, and in a way that gets you into a different biochemical situation, i.e. ketosis, which can help suppress your appetite. That makes a big difference. But, these foods are really, really difficult for people to stop, especially kids. And it's all very impulsive. So the speed at which you can have a thought or be upset or be pissed off or whatever internal state communicates to you that something like the consumption of a chocolate bar will make life better. And then the speed at which you can get that into your hand and then ram it into your face is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And
so, and I mean, it's like the heroin or the cigarette, except we don't know how bad it is, do we?
No, that's right. Because and here's the worst thing. Kids are looking at their parents who are doing this, drinking the Coca-Cola, saying to their kids, you probably should eat more vegetables. I mean, that's like, I don't know, lying to the insurance company and telling your kids that it's bad to lie. Kids will just follow whatever their parents do. So it's very much imitation based, and you've got to create a counter.
The role model. The role model.
What they're consuming online.
But the thing is, the parents' generation, the baby boomers and the early Gen X and so forth. I mean, they were all fed bullshit once upon a time about food as well, because a lot of that was market driven. The food pyramid, for example, where we were all told all the things to eat. I mean, modern science tells a very different story, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, it was really, there is some movement towards the reality of our evolutionary biology, but it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sometimes. Even with regards to type 2 diabetes, you look at the Diabetes Australia websites in the various states, and it used to read type 2 diabetes is a progressive disease and we don't know what causes it, which is just garbage. It can be put into remission, it can be reversed, and we absolutely know what causes it. But there's that lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. And you look at where a lot of the funding comes from for these nutrition studies, it's from big food, it's from companies that make packaged foods, etc., that even fund some of our leading bodies that, for example, the Dietitians Association of Australia is heavily funded by some of these companies, and they were granted the accountability of writing the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which influences everything from what we as parents get told to put in our children's school lunch, all
and
the way
they have
through to yeah, you go.
And they have a huge commercial conflict of interest there, and very, very heavily vested interests.
Absolutely, and it's not just commercial influences; it's even religious influences as well. I mean, Sanitarium, funds a lot of these nutrition studies. Is owned by the Seventh-day Adventists, and they have a particular dietary commitment, which is vegetarian, and their founding prophet, Emily G. White, her message from God apparently was that eating animal products is against the will of God because it increases sexual tendencies. So Dr. Kellogg, who is a Seventh-day Adventist, invented hundreds of packaged food products, primarily to fund that church, and they're all grain-based and seed oils. And this forms a large part of the diet that we've all been told to eat. So, yeah, as you pointed to, there's 40 to 50 years of misinformation, which has really led to a society that's not well. Like I said, 2/3 of the adult population are overweight. And then you throw into the mix a pandemic. And, my original background training was in the area of molecular virology, specifically emerging infectious diseases. So if you get infected by one of these respiratory viruses, it's not the virus that kills you, it's the dysregulation of your immune system that takes you out. And then even long COVID, for those that do recover, experience symptoms, we believe, due to an autoimmune response, perhaps. The science is emerging, is really interesting in that regard. But if you're overweight, you have a suppressed immune system, innate immune system, which means you're not going to be able to knock the viral replication on the head as quickly as a healthy person can, which gives the virus more time to multiply and do more damage in the body, which means you've got to fight harder to stave it off. So that's why we're seeing more severe symptomology in those who, people say have comorbidities, etc. But that's the majority of people in general society here in Australia.
I mean, one of the things that's really frustrated me through the pandemic is that, like a lot of these things, it divides everything up into a very sort of binary group of opinions. So you can't have, there's no sort of sense of nuance. You take any particular cause and you're either a believer or you're a denier, you're a non-believer. So, for example, if a young female who is planning on some point having a family starts questioning, this vaccine that she's putting into herself, that's it's only existed for a few years, and she starts asking questions about that. I think they're reasonable questions to be asked, but of course she will immediately be hounded down, as an anti-vaxxer, and she must be shunned and she must be condemned, even though she's like quite literally trying to find information about, how to go about, managing these safely. The same way that same girl might, if she were consuming any other form of medication, the instructions for which, refer to pregnancy or skin treatment or implant surgery or anything like that. But of course, now those people get completely hound down. So they go to do their own research. And then you go down the rabbit hole. So, I tried this experiment on LinkedIn a few months ago. I said to people, please type in, Google, is COVID, just that search, and watch what Google auto completes. And so some people would see, is COVID a scam as the top query response, and other people would say, is COVID life-threatening? And so, Google was serving up different things to different people. So if you find yourself or your friends find themselves in a sort of, kind of anti-vax or vaccines or a conspiracy sort of frame, that's what's going to get pushed at you. So there's a reason people, believe this and their friends believe it. And so all these kind of groups, and it divides us and it gets us further and further together. And so, one of the, I suppose the key points of critical thinking is being able to listen to someone else's argument, and rather than trying to find as many things wrong with it as you possibly can and why they're wrong and they need to be silenced, try and find things that they're saying which are right. Now, when we look at some of what we're talking about here in respect to food and so forth, people have no idea what they're dealing with. But one of the things that I found fascinating is, very early on in the pandemic, right back when, toilet paper was flying off the shelves, people got this idea that, vitamins and, herbal supplements and things are what's going to keep us safe. And so, of course, all the, the wellness bloggers and the, the anti-vaxxers and, the Byron Bay set, hello, David, who's watching, we're all from Byron Bay who were all over this. Well, fine. But, there is something to be said that you just touched on then, which is in terms of your recoverability from, not just COVID, but, any virus, your nutritional intake is really important. So it's not voodoo science to suggest that you need to be eating lots of fruit and vegetables and healthy stuff in order to stay safe. And so, it's not that, the vaccine will save you so that you can sit on the couch in lockdown eating another bag of Doritos. You actually need to be eating healthily. And this to me is the craziest part of our government's response to COVID. This idea that you have to stay indoors. To me, going outside, going for a walk, going for a swim, going for a surf, going for a jog, getting exposed to daylight is the thing that we should be doing. And the government's actually been telling us, stay at home, where the only thing you can possibly do is order shit you don't need from the internet and get fat. What do you think, Dean?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot has happened. It's hard to believe that it's approaching 2 years that we've been dealing with this. And, a lot of information has been gathered, and we understand a lot more about the actual virus and the associated disease, COVID-19, and what it takes to deal with it and recover. So, when there were a lot more unknowns, and yeah, it was appropriate to err on the side of extreme caution and kind of hide out in our homes, etc. But now we know a lot more, and maybe you got to look at it from a whole, and it's based on how long people are dealing with this and the impact on their life overall. We're not just a biological entity that needs to stay away from a pathogen. We're families, where we work, we have dreams, and we're social creatures, etc. So all of this needs to be taken into account. And I think, yes, sunshine is absolutely critical, and vitamin D levels. And, it's amazing the number of clients that when I started measuring vitamin D levels right at the very outset, I was just blown away by how many people have very low levels of vitamin D level. So, that's something that we would have to supplement in, but, you can't just supplement it in. You got to do both supplementation and sunlight exposure. You need both. So, yeah, look, I think, as we're learning more and more, but at the same time, people have to be grown-ups and be responsible for what we're actually dealing with. You can't just all of a sudden say, oh, this isn't real and I'm going to go do what I want either, because then that, you're part of a society. It's not just about you, and that's the juvenile way of thinking that everyone kind of tends to empower. It's like, oh, I'm going to do what I want to do. Well, you're not a teenager anymore. You're an adult. You've got responsibilities to greater society, and you kind of got to do what's appropriate, not only for you and your health, but also for the greater good of society. So, you got to look at it in that sense, because it's that juvenile brain and that thinking that tends to get us into trouble when we're impulsive and I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Well, you don't get to do that anymore. And part of getting well includes growing up.
Dean, I was at the supermarket the other day and, hoarding toilet paper, as you do. And I was just having a look at the shelves, and I'm interested in the sort of nexus between marketing and big food versus what's going on. So let's have a look at a few things. Now, first of all, this is one of the major supermarkets. You can probably guess which one, which has got a whole section called Real Food. Now, I mean, to me, it's a completely meaningless term. But I pulled one of these sort of real food products off the shelf, and I had a look at what it is. So there it is. It's Real Food, which is braised beef and mash. Now, I don't care how poor you are. Mashed potato is not difficult to whip up. So the idea of sort of rehydrated or dehydrated mash kind of fills me with horror. But these are the ingredients. Okay. Now, all right, it does look to me like it's real in the sense that there's herbs, there's onion, there's vegetables, there's beef, and there's no artificial colors. But when you as a scientist and a food professional look at that, what are you seeing?
I see people over-consuming foods that are overly convenient to stick in their face. There's the illusion that they're eating real whole foods, but they'll over-consume it. I mean, it's just meat and potatoes. I mean, there's nothing that difficult in terms of preparing that yourself from whole foods. The advantage of cooking yourself is it takes time. It takes time to prepare it. You've got to put thinking into it. You've got to chop the vegetables up. You've got to cook it. There's an appreciation of what you're sticking into your face when you do that. When foods are overly convenient, they're very easy to overconsume. I remember watching a series on Netflix one time, and it was about these Asian flavors, predominantly out of China. And some of the flavors that were developed in terms of sauces and master stocks, etc., if you really knew what it took, the months of preparation, the seasons that were involved, the processing steps, the love that goes into it, you wouldn't dare overconsume those foods. You'd have a real appreciation of the energy and effort and forethought and generational continuity that went into the development of those food products. But these days, it's just, you have, again, it's all very impulsive, and it's an illusion that you're eating whole foods if you're continually eating those. Yes, they're convenient, etc., once in a little while to help you out, sure. But if you're eating that stuff all the time, you need a reality check if you're not well. I mean, if you can maintain a healthy metabolism and weight and you're eating that stuff, all power to you. You might want to do the work with a doctor and check your blood levels and make sure everything is on point. But I just don't see those. I don't buy those foods. I don't see them as a real option, a sustainable option, at least anyway.
So, but given that people don't understand this stuff, it's very scientific. People don't know how to read the nutrition information. They don't know the difference between, good sugar, bad sugar, fructose, sucralose, sweeteners, and so forth. I mean, when I've occasionally had to buy, protein supplements or sort of specialized products, I found myself going into health food stores, and 20-something years ago, these places existed, and they were for hippies and strange people called vegans and so forth. But I mean, they've now become a lot more mainstream, and there's a lot of there's a lot of even private equity funding for these sort of businesses. But one of the things that I found fascinating is the way these businesses are really extracting money, and lots of money, from stupid people by using stupid buzzwords. So, everything had the word ethical on it. And look, I mean, no one could possibly argue with that. But, I mean, they're applying the word ethical in these completely sort of meaningless terms. It's like when you buy a product that says, this was not tested on animals. Well, that's because it was tested on animals 40 years ago. They got the answers they needed. They no longer need to do it. So it really is just kind of, marketing and virtue signaling. To me, the sort of depths of this ignorance was made visible to me when I was at a deli, and they had a big wall of salt, and they had all the salt products there. So, and there was a woman standing there, and I mean, this was in the eastern suburbs. A real sort of Bondi wellness blogger sort of person was standing there, and so she had her ethically sourced shawl on, and it was probably knitted, and she had a basket full of vegan this and vegan that, and of course on her feet were sneakers made by child slaves. But anyway, she was standing completely bewildered, looking at all the salt options. Now, to me, salt is sodium chloride. That's all it is. And it doesn't matter if it's rock salt or flake salt or, this type of salt or diamond salt or kosher salt, whatever. Salt is salt, right? And it comes from one of two places. It either comes from the sea, so they call it sea salt, or it's a chemical byproduct from other manufacturing processes that they put in a big drum that, we've all had on the Australian pantry shelves for 30 years. And, and that's it. But, the marketing aspect, I mean, I think, Himalayan pink salt was possibly one of the greatest marketing scams since some South Africans managed to convince women that compressed carbon that they dug out of the ground was actually really precious, right? And so now they've actually convinced people that Himalayan salt is a premium product. It's shit. It's like it's regular salt, except it's now full of impurities because they hacked it out of the corner of a rock where there was a sea millions of years ago. And it's pink. And it's a bit like if you sort of took a diamond, the other scam, except now it's pink. Why is it pink? Because it doesn't have the color and it's full of impurities. But you say, oh, this is a champagne diamond or a rose diamond, and there's going to be a sucker who thinks, ooh, one of those. So she was standing there, sort of tossing up between the Himalayan pink salt, or the Himalayan pink salt with truffle infused or smoked, or the regular sea salt. And if she got sea salt, well, which one? Or there's the Murray River salt, because you don't want salt from the Parramatta River, do you? You want to know which river. Like it was like a peak Sydney thing. But then she finally found the one that went in the basket. It was vegan salt. What the hell makes salt vegan? What, this salt wasn't extracted from the blood of animals or something? I mean, it was like marketing to stupid people. But as I said, so this has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I want to show you some more pics that I took.
If I can just add to that, there's something you got to remember. This just becomes the water that we swim in, the air that we breathe. It just occurs for people as, of course. So banana bread is another great one. I mean, it's a cake. See, if you ate cake every day, people know that that's not a good thing to do, right? You can't eat cake every day. So let's call it bread, because bread is considered a staple. Bread you can eat every day, and let's sell it with, put it there when people buy their daily coffee as well.
But bread is GST free. Bread is GST free. So if you call it banana bread, you don't have to charge GST. You call it banana cake, you might have to.
Well, there you go. It's the commercial realities of it all.
So have a look at this then, Dean. So this is also on the supermarket shelf, and it's called Food for Health. Now, again, a meaningless term, because, I mean, let's face it, to survive, one needs to have certain things, including food. But this, and again, I don't know much about this product, so I'm interested in your thoughts, but it seems to have all the buzzwords there. So Food for Health, then it's probiotic. Now, I mean, no one knows what that is, but it must be good. And then, of course, it says it's date free. Well, so is everybody in lockdown in Melbourne, I suppose. And less than 5 grams of sugar per ball, which of course to me says, well, there must be at least 5 grams of sugar in it. But when we actually dig down and we look at the ingredients, can you break that down for me?
Yeah, sure. So the average quantity per serve, you're looking at 18.9 grams of carbohydrates. So even though it says less than 5 grams of sugar, so 4.4 grams of sugar, you got to remember that the carbohydrates there, especially because there's not that much dietary fiber. So the vast majority of all of that carbohydrate will get converted to glucose, and stimulate insulin. So it's not just the glucose and the sugar that's doing damage in your body, it's the excess amount of insulin that your pancreas secretes. Now that's in combination with 10 grams of fat as well. So that sugar-fat combination, in terms of weight gain, that's the perfect storm. The sugar or the glucose is stimulating insulin release. Insulin is the only hormone in the body that will create the formation of triglycerides, which is the fat storage molecule. So what's a triglyceride made of? 3 fatty acids plus a glycerol molecule, which is derived from glucose, which is derived from the carbohydrates that we eat. So if you eat fat and carbohydrates in combination, perfect storm for fat deposition and weight gain. It also increases inflammation. In terms of the probiotic aspect, I can't quite see. So a probiotic is a supposed beneficial bacteria to support gut health. I can't see how. Oh, here we go. Something there. Colony forming unit, CFU. Okay, we've got the Bacillus coagulans.
So there's 1.25 billion colony forming units.
So per serve, 500 million.
500 million
colony forming units. Now, I suspect with the dry ingredients sold in a pack on the shelf, that company would not have to qualify the viability of those bacteria at the expiry date of that product. So very unlikely that those bacteria will have any kind of beneficial effect if they get to the gut in a viable form at all anyway. I mean, with probiotics, you typically want, if it's a dried bacterium, ideally it would be reconstituted before consumption, which means rehydrated in some kind of solution, whether it be water or something like that, then consumed. Otherwise, the dehydrated bacteria having to rehydrate in your stomach acid and in bile, etc. So it doesn't, it's not great for its viability. And you want it to get to your gut, the lower part of your gut, your intestines, in trillions of cells for it to have some kind of beneficial effect. And the idea of being able to repopulate your gut microflora is somewhat of a fallacy that was brought about by marketing campaigns from some of these leading probiotic companies as well. I mean, your gut, your immune system, et cetera, will just wipe those bacterium out within a day. At best, if you can get them into your gut in high enough numbers, they will help suppress the growth of the bad bacterium. That's all that probiotics do. I take a probiotic. I take it in a decent number. I take it in combination with a prebiotic, which is the appropriate fiber that allows that bacterium to expand to the required numbers. But
it doesn't. But I mean, as someone, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if it's 500 million or 5 billion, because that 500 million will grow very quickly in your gut anyway and become billions and trillions. So it really is a bit of marketing spin, isn't it?
If it does survive, if it is a strain that does survive your stomach acid, and you eat it with the appropriate fiber, there's some great studies that have shown people who were taking probiotics, a wide variety of different probiotics and fermented food products, etc., for gut-related health problems. They took the probiotic or the mass amount of fermented foods that they were consuming, and 70% of them got better. So they took away the probiotics that they were consuming, and their health improved. So there are a number of these probiotic products that actually can potentially increase the growth of the bad bacteria. So who knows what they're doing there?
So you said something interesting to me on the last podcast we did, which was that every supermarket has an aisle called health food, and if they were smart, they'd actually. Well, why don't you tell me what they should do?
Go to the fresh produce area. They
should be hanging the health food sign over the top of the fruit and vegetables. So let's take a look at this. So this is the aisle lookout. So in the first aisle, in very small writing, we have health foods, and of course that's right above gluten-free and right above cereal, which includes such healthy things as sugar snaps and Cocoa Pops and so forth. And in the very next aisle, you've got cordial, juice, lollies, biscuits, chocolates, right across from a sign that says "We love cake." Now, look, the supermarkets aren't stupid; they know what's going to sell, and you know what? If people want to buy it, that's their right. However, at the same time, when I actually look at the way some of these things have evolved, so as well as having food for health that we looked at a moment ago, there's a new phenomenon. I mean, look, these are just fried snacks, right? Is there really any? I mean, when you think about it, a potato chip is a fried vegetable, right? Is there any real difference between veggie crisps or brown rice crisps, except for the fact that they probably just don't taste as good as the regular potato chips? There's nothing inherently healthy about any of these sort of products, is there? Because these are all aimed largely to go in children's lunch boxes for snacks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, the thing that people have to appreciate is you've got to eat less. People just eat way too much. And that these food companies, just like the PhD level geniuses in Silicon Valley, are trying to figure out how to dominate your attention online. These food industry, these companies and the products that they develop, there's just as much genius put into it when it comes to convincing you to purchase foods and consume them and become addicted to them. Foods that you don't need, you don't even really want. You're there, you're impulsive. I mean, not to, I don't want to say anything bad about the big supermarket chains, but I try my best not to go to them. Every now and again, you do, have to go get certain products for around the house. But the majority of the food that I buy are from smaller greengrocers. It's a bit more expensive, but guess what? I don't buy as much. And I certainly don't buy much of the stuff that I don't need, which I tend to when I go to those bigger supermarkets. I walk out with a whole bunch of things that I just wasn't intending to buy. And so I try not to go to those environments. It's too damn well designed to convince me to buy stuff I don't need.
So let's get a 10-second review of this. So this soft drink has got 1 billion probiotics. Thoughts?
Probably useless. Yeah, I wouldn't buy that.
Okay. Now this is one that's been around for a very, very long time. I mean, 20 years ago, even my mum's dietitian was warning about things. Where they say no added sugar, that doesn't mean that something's not completely chock full of sugar, does it?
No, that's right. You want to look at the nutrition panel and look at the total amount of carbohydrates, net carbohydrates, not just the sugar. You got to remember that the total amount of carbohydrates net carbohydrates gets converted to glucose anyway, has the same damaging effects on your body.
Yeah. So carbs are bad, this is just regular yogurt, and it's not a bad yogurt brand, I might add, but now they have Fit X, which it's just pure marketing, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing that screams fitness about Rocky Road and Bubble and Black Forest Burst, but hey, they've stuck the word fit on it, right?
Yeah, and some of these products can be useful in the right nutritional context, depending on what you're committed to accomplishing through that dietary approach. So some of those, yogurts could be useful. I mean, when I put someone on a metabolic reprogramming structure, I don't have them consuming dairy. I mean, just the biochemistry of their body, when I put them into ketosis, certain things are too inflammatory, and I try and reduce the inflammation as much as possible. Casein is the primary protein in dairy products like yogurt, so I don't have them eating yogurt or cheese, etc., whilst they're losing the weight. When I transition them back to a more Mediterranean style diet, then the inclusion of some of those products can be, beneficial. Just also just in terms of your overall experience of life. You got to eat some of these foods, but certainly not all the packaged junk food. You want to avoid that as much as possible. We're just eating way too much ultra processed food.
Okay, so this stuff again, it's added at the it's aimed at the kids. So there's pictures of lions and things like that, and it's probably a bit better than the Yogos and the chocolate yogurts and things that were sort of sold once upon a time. But of course, once upon a time, the kid eating the Yogo was probably also riding his bike 15 kilometers a day, not lying in bed, exercising his thumb on Instagram. So besides creating a whole lot of packaging waste, this stuff all says kids on it, and so it's full of buzzwords about probiotics and ultimate and so forth. But one thing that's interesting,
a lot of these products, they cater to parents who want to do right by their kids, and then when you go to the counter, then a lot of the candy is put at eye level for kids, who will then just nag their parents into submission.
Well, that's that's a trick that's been around as long as supermarkets have been around. But this is the new one, and you can tell the sort of market they're going for. Boost immunity. Well,
yeah. No, I mean the number one thing you want to do is reduce sugar intake. So in terms of these foods, you want to people want to be educated. Look at the labels. And understand that for all the foods, there's a cost benefits ratio that you want to look at for yourself. So the benefit would be protein intake. The cost would be carbohydrate. Don't be too afraid of fat, especially if you're metabolically well. So that's the fat intake has been demonized for many decades, and it really isn't as bad as people think. It is bad when you overconsume carbohydrates and sugar. Similarly with salt intake. So for the most part, salt, yes, is bad if you're consuming an excess amount of carbohydrates. So salt in a background context of high insulin will be retained by the kidneys and drive up renal hypertension and overall blood pressure. So that there, hypertension and blood pressure, is the number one risk factor for all-cause mortality, especially cardiovascular disease. So, of course, if you present with high blood pressure, the doctor will say, stop eating so much salt. But if you're on a low carbohydrate diet or a carb-restricted diet, you absolutely need salt intake. Don't be afraid of the salt if you're restricting carbohydrates.
Okay, so protein is a good thing. We like protein, right?
Yeah, people underconsume protein. What you want to do is regulate your protein intake throughout the day. What tends to happen is people leave the majority of their protein intake to the latter part of the day. Your body will only absorb a certain amount of that. So you're kind of wasting it, and you want to consume more earlier on. So break your fast in the morning with a decent amount of protein. Consume protein. Doesn't have to be just from animal sources. You want to consume a wide variety of different protein. I don't get sucked into the vegan versus carnivore argument. I work with vegans as well who want to restore their metabolic rate. I get extraordinary outcomes with those clients, and they don't consume animal protein. So,
I mean, having a look at the product on screen at the moment, protein is now appearing on everything at the supermarket. This has protein, that has protein. I mean, that to me almost seems like the new sort of marketing spin. I mean, even when I looked at that previous one, it said, with live cultured yogurt. It's like, well, that's literally the only way to even make yogurt. So there's so much marketing spin. But I mean, is protein just the new sort of low fat? It's the buzzword that people are going to be drawn toward?
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, we do need a certain amount of protein. It's probably, the requirements are probably higher than what we've historically thought them to be, depending on people's activity levels. And especially as we get a bit older, people need to make sure that there's an adequate intake of protein. I mean, it's important throughout an entire lifespan, but you can't just be, eating collagen or drinking collagen, thinking that that's an adequate amount of protein. Collagen, for example, is missing an amino acid. It's very rich in specific to other types of amino acids, proline in particular. So it's not the best source. But, people do need to understand how to add in a sufficient amount of protein, particularly if they're on a vegan diet. Pea protein is a great way to supplement that in. But, don't be hoodwinked into thinking that, you eat enough protein balls and that's sufficient. That's not the best way to go about it.
As a function of your weight, how much protein should people be consuming a day?
Again, it depends on what kind of nutritional program they're on. For example, if you're trying to lose weight, you want to be consuming an adequate amount of protein to prevent the loss of lean tissue. So it's not really advocated for a protein sparing diet. I don't really hear much people talking about that, but I think in my view, that's the best approach, where you're not overexerting yourself with strenuous exercise trying to build your muscle. Instead, you consume throughout the day an adequate amount of protein that preserves the muscle that you've got whilst you churn through your own fat stores. What's that ideal amount of protein? For the average adult, it would be 80 grams of protein, of highly bioavailable, easily absorbable protein. And it depends. If you're a bigger person with more muscle mass, for example, over 91 kilograms of lean mass, then you'd have to consume more, probably 100 grams of protein. And some of these South Pacific Islanders just have a massive amount of muscle that I need to preserve. So I have them consuming even more protein. The body adapts to utilizing that protein as an energy source as well. And that's what preserves the muscle that you've got. Otherwise, you run the risk of breaking down your muscle. And when people are trying to lose weight, what tends to happen is they break down their own muscle mass because they're eating less total calories, but an insufficient amount of protein throughout the day. So
when you see something like this, it's like, oh, it's got protein in huge letters, but I mean, it's got a lazy 10 grams of protein, as compared to eating that entire muesli bar. It's just dudding, isn't it?
Yeah. And then also, again, if protein's the benefit, what's the cost? What are the carbohydrates in there? And if the foods are inflammatory to the gut, then it's not going to be beneficial at all.
This was probably the best one I saw. This seemed to tick every single trendy box imaginable. So first of all, we have everybody's favorite buzzword at the moment, kombucha. Now, personally, I happen to think kombucha tastes disgusting, and the only way kombucha doesn't taste disgusting is if they add it to all sorts of artificially flavored drinks. But so this has kombucha. It also contains prebiotic fiber and 25% less sugar with a teeny tiny little asterisk. So, and the word natural. So, 25% less sugar than what? We don't know. And of course, in the next aisle, now look, this is one that's really important to everybody in my professional circle, just food you can grab, on the run. And, these things have been around for a while. There's entire shelves full of them. Now it's the same thing, but you can see at the top, they add protein. If you're in a mad rush, Dean, what do you just grab and go in the morning? Because I'm guessing it doesn't come in a cardboard container.
No, if I'm in a mad rush, I just don't worry about it. I just drink a glass of water. People got to, being hungry is not a problem. The food industry has taught us over many decades that it's bad and wrong to be hungry, and you should never be hungry. There's nothing wrong with being hungry. I mean, being hungry, having periods of throughout your day where you're hungry, or this is beneficial in terms of extending your overall health span. So in terms of the longevity science, what seems to be consistent is regular experiences of being uncomfortable. Being hungry is one of them. Sorry, hold on one second. You're too noisy, sweetheart. Okay, my daughter's just playing in the background.
Bring her in. Bring her in. Bring her.
That's okay.
I'll make her famous.
That's all right. Yeah.
So okay. So Dean, look at this. So these are now the sort of healthier snack options. So we've got just plain cheese, and at the top we've got lots of things that sort of say protein. And this one was my favorite. I mean, this is basically $4 or $5 worth of ready to go sort of somewhat healthy things. That are good snack, but it's just all the snack except with with the additional packaging. Is this a good thing? Are these the snacks that people should be consuming? What do we think about beef jerky or bit of cheese, bit of nuts? I mean, nuts are quite carby, but this is a very, very small serving of it.
Yeah, a little bit of hard cheese. Nuts, but you don't want the nuts that are fried and have excess amount of flavoring on them. And jerky, if it's just dried meat, if that's all it is, then that sort of stuff is fine. But you don't want to overconsume all the preservatives and additives and organophosphates that tend to be included in those types of foods. So just check the labels. I mean, the good thing about them is it's better than eating something that might be more damaging, and it's better than I don't know, if you overconsume sugar from a juice bar or something like that, and I mean, it's got like 10 different pieces of fruit in there. I mean, when are you ever going to sit down and eat 10 whole pieces of fruit? So you don't need that either. But at least with these little packaged things, I don't know about that particular product, at least it's somewhat portion control. So long as you're not eating 3, 4, 5 of them at the one time, it is only one. So that can help some people.
You mentioned cheese earlier, so here's the cheese shelf. Are some cheeses particularly good or particularly bad?
They taste great. You got to remember what are you eating with the cheese. So if you're eating over-consuming crackers with the cheese, then that's the cost. Some of the cheeses come with great bacteria on them or microflora, so that can be beneficial potentially, so you don't want to be too afraid of, again, fat, but some of the cheeses may be a little bit inflammatory. And again, it depends what you're eating it with. Certainly when people...
the cheese cancels out the wine, doesn't it?
No, well, the benefit of eating cheese with wine is wine has in it anti-aging molecules such as resveratrol and quercetin. Quercetin's kind of started to come into the limelight. These are polyphenol antioxidants that in the context of wine, it can be easily absorbed if you take smaller sips and just let it coat the lining of the mouth and absorb through the buccal mucosa into your bloodstream. The advantage of consuming fat type foods with the wine, such as cheese, is the fat can help the bioavailability potentially of these polyphenol antioxidants. So, wine and cheese is not necessarily such a bad thing. However, if you're trying to restore yourself to good health, if you are in a state of metabolic derangement, i.e. you're overweight, I don't recommend eating those types of foods. When you're healthy and your body can handle it, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a glass of wine, red wine in particular, a day isn't such a bad thing.
Which meats do we like?
Oh, goodness. Try keep it lean. But, it depends on, again, your philosophical views and your commitments to animals, etc. I mean, I like the grass-fed, type products. So my butcher, he's quite a distance away, and he's, I feel a little bit better buying meat from him. It's Demeter certified, biodynamic, organic produce. Maybe those animals are woken up by nice music and told stories. I don't know. It makes me feel a little
all
bit
the buzzwords.
The meat.
Exactly. Dean, just using your hands, how big do you reckon a tomahawk steak is?
Oh goodness, tomahawks like this, right?
Yeah. Look what I found. That's my hand for scale.
Oh gosh.
I think this is sort of pitched at people who read something on a food blog about the latest trend at steakhouses and want to do it themselves. It feels like they're missing a point. Just absolutely unbelievable. All right, so Dean, if people want to know what websites they can get reliable advice from and what to avoid, what would you tell them?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, Daniel, I don't know. I read widely. I try to appreciate everything that's out there, but it all comes with its bias. I mean, gosh, me included to a degree. So I think people need to invest the time in really understanding the basic nutritional biochemistry. There are some great sites out there. Diet Doctor is a good one. I think there's some great information from some leading experts. Again, they all have their biases, whether it's going to be vegan or whether they're carnivore or somewhere in between, or whether they're selling a product or affiliated with a product. You just got to go in with an open mind, learn what you can. But if you are committed to restoring health, do it in partnership with an expert. Get some guidance, get some baseline blood work done. Find a GP that would be committed to you generating the outcomes that are really going to make a difference to your performance in life, your ability to accomplish what you're really out to achieve. I mean, there's no good just getting a great looking body so you look fabulous in your own coffin, because that's the inevitable outcome for all of us. You want to restore health and vitality so you can be as productive as possible with the life that you've got right now in the fulfillment of whatever it is that you're committed to, whether it be in your job, with your family, or your community. That's got to be the overarching context.
Right. And Dean, if people want to speak to you and they want to know more, what can you do to help people, and how can they find you?
Yeah, you can visit the website simpler.health. That's SIMPLR.health. That's for those that are interested in losing weight, restoring metabolic health. If you're interested in handling some other ailments such as degenerated joints or painful joints, you can visit cellgen.com.au or CK Cell Technologies. Visit those sites, or just contact me directly via LinkedIn or Facebook.
Dean, that's been really helpful, and I think every time I speak to you, I learn something new, and every time I go to the supermarket, it just makes me that little bit more discerning in what I buy and how to basically stay healthy. So look, I really appreciate your time today. I think everyone will have learned something. You're actually doing probably a lot more to make Australians healthier than some of our elected leaders are doing to try and keep us healthy. So once again, Dean, thank you very, very much for joining all of us today. Really appreciate your time.
Appreciate the opportunity.